I was noticing just now as I was turning on the little microphone box that the little battery is empty and flashing. So I don't know if it's even picking up, but I'll try to speak loudly this evening so that you can all hear me. We've had a great weekend of fellowship, and I meant to mention that this morning, but it started out on Friday evening. We had a first annual, I guess you could say, movie night here at the building. There were some kinks to be worked out, but the next time we'll probably have it a better handle on it. But we had good food and hot dogs and just good fellowship with another. And then today we enjoyed a great meal, had a great number here this morning, a lot of old familiar faces that we've not seen, but a great attendance, and then follow that up with a wonderful meal. And we thank you to all those that cook every time that we do have a meal. Thank you for being back here again this evening. I recently read about a former slave by the name of Arnold Gagston. Mr. Gagston spent most of his life on a large plantation in Mason County, Kentucky. And if you were to look for Mason County on a map, you'll find that it's situated in the northeastern portion of Kentucky. And I did a little research on that county, and Google tells me that the county seat of Mason County is Mayfield, Kentucky, and it's established on the banks of the Ohio River. So right across from that river lies the state of Ohio. And you may be wondering, okay, Blake, well, why are you telling us this information? Well, in the days of slavery, this location was of notable significance because Ohio, during the days of the Civil War, was a free northern state, and a northern state for a slave equaled freedom. In his memoir, Arnold Gagston noted that he was owned by a rather favorable man. It said that he was required to still work every day, sun up to sundown, but Mr. Gagston stated he had the special allowance from his owner to visit other plantations at night as long as he returned for work on the next day. So he would work each day, and then when it was time to go to bed, if he so chose, he could go to bed, but if not, he could go out and see the town, if you will. And admittedly, Gagston wrote that he utilized this special privilege to go out courting young ladies. But then he was approached with a very unique opportunity. He was approached with the idea of rowing fellow slaves across the Ohio River into freedom. And he said the first night he was asked to row a young lady slave, and he was overcome with anxiety when thinking about that idea. And he told originally the requesting party no. And he went home and he, I guess, did his work for the day, the following day. And it said as he worked throughout the following day that proposition weighed so heavily on his mind, the thought of that young lady crossed his mind so often that come nightfall, he returned to the conspiring party and said, "Let's do it." I want to read straight from his words what he said about that. He said, "I don't know how I ever rowed the boat across that river. The current was strong and I was trembling. I couldn't see a thing there in the dark, but I felt that young girl's eyes. We didn't dare whisper, so I couldn't tell her how sure I was that one of the slave owners would tear me up when they found out what I had done. I just knew that I would be found out." And he said, pretty soon I saw that tall light, and what he was referencing was a light that had been set up by the smugglers to kind of signify where to take the slaves to freedom and safety. So after that first trip across the Ohio River and back, it ended in a success. And that was just the start of a 4-year journey, if you will, for Mr. Gagston. And over that 4-year span, it was estimated that Gagston carried between 200 and 300 slaves across the river into freedom. He said at its peak that he would carry as many as 12 people across the river each night on the journey to freedom. He concludes the story by disclosing that by the time this operation had gotten active, the people on the Ohio side of the river became suspicious of what he was doing. And he became the target of unknown attackers. Today, we still don't even know who it was that was after him, but they compiled a mob, if you will, to take care of him. And one night it said that he was forced to flee, and the next several days he spent hiding and sleeping out in a cornfield or in the branches of a tree or hiding in a hay pile before he ultimately made the decision to take his wife and go across the river into freedom himself. In his story, I read of this in a book that was compiled during the Federal Arts Project. It was a project to help people make money similar to like the TVA during the 1930s and the Great Depression. And Braxton did this story when he was 107 years old in Jacksonville, Florida. And I tell this story because as I read it, I couldn't help but feel like that the heroic and brave actions of Mr. Braxton are very similar to our obligations as a Christian. We, like Braxton, have discovered the route to freedom. By the grace of God, we've gotten the ticket out of bondage of sin and misery. But I ask you this evening, kind of the topic, kind of the focus point of our lesson tonight is how often do we back out or shy away from leading others to freedom? Maybe we throw up various excuses like, I don't want to suffer the social consequences at work for inviting others to church all the time. Have you ever been in that situation where you ask the same person over and over and over again, hey, come with me to church, or we're having this event? I know, like you, it can become tiresome, to say the least. Maybe you think in your mind, well, he's a loyal member at so-and-so church. If I show him what the Bible has to say on so-and-so topic, there's no way that he's possibly going to see what it has to say. Maybe you doubt your talent as a servant of Christ, whether that be conducting a Bible study with someone, or maybe talking to somebody, maybe encouraging someone, visiting them. It can be intimidating. Instead, while we often have that route to freedom through the gospel, too many times, myself included, we choose to tuck away that ticket, if you will, in our pockets. Various influences out there convince us just to be quiet. And I thought about Arnold Braxton in comparison to that gospel. He could have easily crossed the Ohio River that one time and never looked back. Just like us, we can obey the gospel. Each person has their own decision to make. We could have obeyed the gospel ourselves and not worried about anybody else. We can just cash in our ticket, if you will, or maybe that's the way that we think. Never mind that the Bible instructs us to share the gospel, but maybe we think, I'm taken care of, so who else do I have to worry about? But, of course, Braxton, he decided to go another route. He decided to go back time and time again to bring others with him to safety. So in our brief lesson this evening, I ask you, are we doing the same tonight? Who do you know that is so close to safety this evening, yet remains in the shackles of sin? Who do you know that's standing on the banks of that river waiting on you to lead them through the understanding of obedience into freedom? And make no mistake about it, Arnold Braxton only played a small role in his brethren securing their ultimate freedom. Each fellow slave had his or her own obligation. They had to make the decision to get into the boat and make that journey. And once on the other side, another free man on the shore of Ohio had to figure out the logistics of getting the smuggled slave into a totally secure location. But nevertheless, if Braxton doesn't row that boat night after night after night, a key piece of that large chain is missing. Many enslaved people may have never gotten to experience the sweet realization of freedom had it had not been for Arnold Braxton. Who do you know that is lost that you may be their Arnold Braxton? If you don't share your knowledge of the gospel route to freedom with them, they may never find it. I think about the words of Jesus to his disciples in Matthew chapter 9, verse 37 through 38. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. And don't get it misconstrued this evening. It is not our job to determine whether or not the surrounding community or the world will accept or reject the gospel. All we can do is preach, church. All we can do is share the word. But it is our job to get out and share the message with the church, with the lost, rather. And I think about an occurrence that I believe you all in the adult Bible class have talked about recently in Mark chapter 9, when Jesus healed the paralytic man. Think about the effort the man's 4 friends went through to ultimately lead their friend to being healed by Jesus. When they get to the house in verse 2 of Mark 2, it said that there were so many people crowding the door that they couldn't even fit through. They couldn't even think to get through. Just think about in this building that there were so many people hearing Jesus speak that they couldn't fit through the doors, they couldn't fit through the windows. And, that was just a challenge. They could have said, dust my hands off, we gave it a good shot, guys. Sorry, our friend, can't help you. That's the same way in the challenges that we have today. Many of the same excuses that we throw up. Maybe there is a person that's lost, that's attended the services somewhere else for a long time. But they did not give up there. They determined that they were going to bring their friend to Christ. So what did they do? They climbed up on the roof and began tearing it away. I've read and studied before, I don't know the exact details, but I had heard that the roofs of that time were flat. And they were made of the material around them, earth, dirt, grass, if you will, and that they literally pulled that back little by little to make a hole to bring their friend through. And ultimately, because of their friend's actions, the friends of the man's actions, that man was healed physically and spiritually on that day. So I ask you this evening, what are we doing as a church and what are we doing as individuals to bring the lost to Christ? We have a really good thing, I believe, that we've started on the welcome cards, following up with people that visit with us. How are we using those prospects, if you will? How many people right here in our communities are lost that maybe you know as your neighbor or your first cousin or whoever it may be? There are plenty of people out there that need the gospel. And as we close, I think of the parable of the sower and how there will be ultimately various conditions of soil in which we sow. I was talking to somebody here tonight that, we can only preach the gospel. We can only sow that seed. There may be the conditions of the soil may be various, but it doesn't mean that the sower didn't throw out that seed. Peter and Stephen, as we talked about this morning, they both show us that there will be those out there that receive the gospel with gladness, and there are others who won't want anything to do with what you have to say. And ultimately, as we were talking about in class this morning with persecution, not only are they not going to want to hear what you have to say, they're not going to want to have anything to do with you any longer. But ultimately, there's still good soul out there for us to sow in. I think about how Jesus concluded the parable of the sower in Mark chapter 4, verse 9. He said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." So this evening, how are you going to share the gospel with others as you go out into the world? Maybe you don't feel comfortable speaking. Maybe you don't feel like you're good at articulating. We have in our hands, each one of us, a cell phone and a social media page that's extremely easy to click share. Take a link of someone that is blessed with the talent to preach, to teach, and share their message with somebody else. I got news for you. I'm very appreciative of the compliments that I get, but guess where I get it from? People that are more wise in the Word than myself. Maybe this evening, you know the route to freedom, but you're still standing on that bank. Like I said, each person makes their own decision. There are Arnold Graxtons in our lives, but each person makes that own decision to get in the boat and cross the river themselves. You know the route, but you have to make that decision. I think about the Apostle Paul when he was Saul, when he met God on the road to Damascus. He says, "Go and you'll be told what it is to do." And in a way, God sent an Arnold Graxton to Paul and Ananias, right? He told him, "Why do you wait? Arise and be baptized, arise and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord." This evening, if you've not done so, I invite you to do it now as we stand and as we sing.